Picture an electron scattering off a photon. Simple enough, right? A photon comes in, the electron absorbs it, continues on its way, and emits a new photon. We call this the scattering of light. But when we make the diagrams and calculations for scattering, we must include some peculiar possibilities. The electron could emit a photon before absorbing one. Already strange, but there's something even more bizarre lurking in the mathematics. The electron emits a photon then, and this is the really odd part, travels backwards in time to absorb a photon, and then proceeds forwards in time again. Yes, backwards in time, not as some theoretical abstraction, but as a real measurable phenomenon. The path of such a backwards moving electron can be so long as to appear real in an actual physical experiment in the laboratory. Think about that for a moment. We're not talking about mathematical tricks or convenient fictions. We're talking about something you can detect, measure, verify in a lab. Now, when you observe this backwards moving electron, while time moves forward for you, here's what happens. The backwards moving electron appears the same as an ordinary electron, except it's attracted to normal electrons. We say it has a positive charge. Had I included the effects of polarization, it would be apparent why the sign of charge for the backwards moving electron appears reversed, making the charge appear positive. For this reason, it's called a positron. The positron is a sister particle to the electron and is an example of an antiparticle. And here's where it gets truly profound. This phenomenon is general. Every particle in nature has an amplitude to move backwards in time, and therefore has an antiparticle. Every single one. Long before anyone understood why, Dirac predicted that in addition to electrons, there must be another particle called the positron discovered at Caltech by Anderson that is necessarily related to the electron. The story of this prediction is remarkable, really. Dirac simply followed where his equations led, even when they seemed to predict something impossible. All the properties of these two particles obey certain rules of correspondence. The energies are equal, the masses are equal, the charges are reversed. But more important than anything, the two of them, when they come together, can annihilate each other and liberate their entire mass in the form of energy, gamma rays usually. The positron is called an antiparticle to the electron, and these are the characteristics of a particle and its antiparticle. This wasn't just a theoretical curiosity. When Anderson found the positron in cosmic ray experiments, it confirmed Dirac's wild prediction and opened up an entirely new way of thinking about particles. The mathematics had predicted reality before reality revealed itself to us. It was clear from Dirac's argument that all the rest of the particles in the world should also have corresponding antiparticles. For instance, for the proton, there should be an antiproton, which is now symbolized by a P with a bar over it. The antiproton would have a negative electrical charge and the same mass as a proton, and so on. The most important feature, however, is that a proton and an antiproton coming together can annihilate each other. Now here's where people get confused, and it's worth spending time on this because it reveals something deep about what anti really means. The reason we emphasize this annihilation property is that people do not understand it when we say there is a neutron and also an antineutron, because they say, wait, a neutron is neutral, so how can it have the opposite charge, you see? This question reveals a common misconception. The rule of the anti is not just that it has the opposite charge. It has a certain set of properties, the whole lot of which are opposite. Electric charge is just one property among many. The antineutron is distinguished from the neutron in this way. If we bring two neutrons together, they just stay as two neutrons. But if we bring a neutron and an antineutron together, boom, they annihilate each other with a great explosion of energy being liberated with various pi mesons, gamma rays, and whatnot. The explosion is spectacular precisely because neutrons have mass, quite a lot of it compared to electrons. When that mass converts to energy, according to Einstein's E equals mc squared, you get a tremendous release. The products aren't just simple photons like with electron-positron annihilation. You get a shower of different particles, a complex cascade of energy transforming into matter and back again. This leads to a fascinating possibility that stretches our imagination. If we have antineutrons, antiprotons, and anti-electrons, we can make anti-atoms in principle. They have not been made yet, but it is possible in principle. The physics allows it. Only the engineering challenges stand in our way. For instance, a hydrogen atom has a proton in the center with an electron going around outside. It's the simplest atom, the building block of the universe. Now imagine that somewhere we can make an antiproton with a positron going around it. Would it work? Would it be stable? Would it behave like hydrogen? Well, first of all, the antiproton is electrically negative, and the anti-electron is electrically positive, so they attract each other in a corresponding manner. The masses are all the same. Everything is the same. The electromagnetic force that binds ordinary hydrogen would bind antihydrogen in exactly the same way. The quantum mechanics that governs electron orbitals would govern positron orbitals identically. It is one of the principles of the symmetry of physics. The equations seem to show that if a clock were made of matter on one hand, and then we made the same clock of antimatter, it would run in the same way. The ticking would be identical. The mechanisms would function the same. Every process that happens in matter should have an exact mirror in antimatter. Of course, if we put the clocks together, they would annihilate each other, but that is different. Keep them apart, and they're indistinguishable. But now an immediate question arises, and it's one that shook physics to its core. We can build, out of matter, two clocks, one which is left hand and one which is right hand. For example, we could build a clock which has cobalt and magnets and electron detectors which detect the presence of beta decay electrons and count them. Each time one is counted, the second hand moves over. This is based on real experiments done with cobalt-60, a radioactive isotope. You align the nucleus spins using a magnetic field, cool everything down to nearly absolute zero to keep the alignment, and then you watch which direction the beta decay electrons prefer to go. Then the mirror clock, receiving fewer electrons, will not run at the same rate. So evidently, we can make two clocks, such that the left-hand clock does not agree with the right-hand one. Prior to that famous physical discovery, it was thought that they would. This was shocking. For decades, physicists had assumed that the universe was perfectly symmetric under mirror reflection. Left and right should be equivalent, but they're not. The weak nuclear force which governs beta decay violates this symmetry. Now, it was also supposed that matter and antimatter were equivalent. That is, if we made an antimatter clock right-hand the same shape, then it would run the same as the right-hand matter clock. But careful experiments showed the deeper rule. Matter to the right works the same way as antimatter to the left. The symmetry wasn't destroyed, it just got hidden in a more complicated way. You have to combine two transformations, matter to antimatter and left to right, to recover the symmetry. This combined symmetry is called CP symmetry, for charge conjugation and parity. Think about what this means. We thought we understood how the universe worked. We thought left and right were the same. Then we discovered they're not the same. The universe picks a direction, but then we found that if you flip both things, matter to antimatter and left to right, you get back to the same physics. The symmetry isn't lost, it's just more complicated than we thought. This even leads to a curious thought experiment about communicating with alien civilizations. Imagine we make contact with beings on another world through radio signals. Eventually we decide to meet face to face. But how do we define right and left across the void of space using only the laws of physics? Before parity violation was discovered, we couldn't do it. But now we can use beta decay experiments. Build the cobalt-60 experiment, align the spins, measure which direction electrons prefer to emerge. That direction defines right. If the aliens get the same result, they're made of matter like us. If they get the opposite result, they are made of antimatter. And if we ever meet them, we'd better be careful. One handshake between matter and antimatter would annihilate both in a burst of gamma rays. This brings us back to the fundamental behavior of particles. When a particle and its antiparticle collide, they annihilate and convert their entire mass into energy. For electrons and positrons, that energy appears as photons. But the process is reversible. High-energy photons can create particle-antiparticle pairs. This happens constantly in cosmic rays and particle accelerators. Photons themselves are special. They are their own antiparticles because a photon traveling backward in time looks exactly the same as one traveling forward. And this brings us to the remarkable interpretation proposed by Feynman. When we see an electron and a positron appear from pure energy, we can interpret it as a single electron making a U-turn in time. The positron is simply the electron moving backward through time. Annihilation is the same path viewed from another perspective. From our forward-moving viewpoint, it looks like particles appear and disappear, but really the electron's world line simply bends through time. Strange as it sounds, this interpretation works perfectly. The calculations match experiments with extraordinary precision. Every Feynman diagram includes paths where particles move both forward and backward in time. We sum over all possible paths, and nature gives the right answer every time. Nature has spoken, and the mathematics is clear. Particles can and do travel backwards in time.